Step 3, manage your media menu. Remember, it's not only food that we digest every day. Media, whether it be ads or music or social media or news, it's constantly bombarding our brains, or at least it is here in LA. And our brain responds whether we know it or not. So, hopefully, in this module, I'll be able to give you some insight on how this is affecting our brain chemistry. Then I'll share some tips and techniques that may decrease addiction, anxiety, depression, or ADHD responses to social media intake and news intake, and then give you some tools to manage what you do take in. It's not all bad. I'm going to hate on it a little bit, but it's not all bad. It simply needs to be managed and aligned with your goals and your values. These are the things that I have done and am human, so occasionally still do. Doom scrolling, because the social media feeds that are back to back, they just keep you locked in and totally distracted. You get me on some really cute puppy videos and I am stuck. I remember one time I told my coach that I spent 2 hours watching people do nice things for other people instead of going out and doing nice things for other people. And it was an eye opener. It was really an eye opener. Basically, I cheated. I got all of the reward chemicals from doing something nice, whether that's dopamine or oxytocin for doing something loving. I got all of that reward without actually doing the activity, which then in turn made me seek the easier way of getting those chemicals instead of doing the work. So it kind of trains our brain to be a little lazy. Next is comparison to others, because we always look at that highlight reel of success and you use it as a bat against yourself. And I get this. And I get this from my clients. I get this from myself, and feeling like I should have that body or that lifestyle, or always feeling like maybe you're not as far along in life as you should be at this age or at this stage in your career, which leaves you totally ungrateful and maybe even resentful for where you currently are. And what's the point in that? You're not even enjoying your actual life, which might be perfectly beautiful and have room for growth. So, are there people that are very inspired by looking at the fitness video and then you go work out? Yes. Yes, that is awesome. If that's you, that is so good. And this might not be your obstacle. But from the research that I've seen, 85% of viewers use social media as a comparison to their own worth, their own self-worth, and their own lifestyle. It's not really healthy. And lastly is the negative news noose, letting current events suck you in and create a lot of stress. And I'm not implying that you shouldn't be up to date with current events. However, I would recommend that you don't watch the disaster coverage over and over and over, especially when it's like over sensationalized. And right now, our news isn't just flowery language. It's all adjectives and adverbs that make you want to cringe. And if it's a bunch of fear mongering, it's going to put me in a negative headspace. Therefore, I'm not going to be as productive, and I'm going to make different choices when I'm in that kind of headspace. So I bring up these obstacles because GEICO, there's a whole, I think it's based on computers. It's like if you think about our brain as a computer, garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you put in the software system, if you code it with garbage, you're going to get garbage out of that computer system. It's the same kind of stuff with our brain and with our body. So what you're taking in really, really matters. Whatever I feed myself in my brain, whatever I'm listening to, whoever is influencing me, that's the way I'm going to think. And if I'm thinking this way, that's where my words will go. If my words are going that way, that's where my actions will come out. So I want to be very careful with my input so I can have more intention with my output, because what I'm giving out to the world matters. So if I'm wasting too much time scrolling, being distracted and beating myself up for not having what she has, or getting angry at politics or disasters, then I'm not going to be as positively impactful as I want to be. And I would encourage you, don't rob the world of who you could be. Manage your media menu to reduce anxiety and depression and double your productive time. This is exactly what happened to me. So there's a lot of research, and it indicates that social media use has really complex effects on anxiety, depression, and ADHD. There was a 2022 study found that if it was a problem, your social media use, it was significantly associated with increasing the odds of having ADHD, with anxiety mediating that relationship too. It's the constant stimulation from social media platforms. They decrease attention, which potentially exacerbates ADHD symptoms. And regarding depression, there was a 2024 Johns Hopkins study that revealed higher social media use correlated with higher depression levels. And it did not cause an increase of depressive symptoms over time, though. So, and it suggests a bidirectional relationship where depressed individuals might use social media more rather than social media directly causing depression. So you're depressed, you don't feel like it, so you're going to go to social media rather than when you look at social media, you get depressed. Although that happens for me too. For me, it's a little bit more anxiety causing, I find, in my body when I'm mentally aware and mindful. That's what shows up for me. So for anxiety, research actually shows the problematic level of social media use, and you get to decide what that is for you, depending on what part of your life is affected. It's totally linked to higher anxiety. So this one was interesting, and I want to say it out loud because I believe in our children being relational and having conversations and communal. They found kids that spend more time on social media have way higher rates of anxiety. And then in 2018, there was a British study that said, social media disrupts sleep, which we already talked about. And if you're not sleeping, that's going to increase the likelihood of anxiety and depression and ADHD symptoms. And it's really important to note that the relationship between social media and mental health is very complex and everybody's individual. And some studies suggest that depressive symptoms might precede increased social media use, particularly in younger females. And then some say that it's more that you're already depressed and you use it. Some also say that it can be correlated, not a causation, but a correlation. The impact of social media on mental health can also be influenced by factors such as like your green space exposure. Like, are you actually outside? Do you have a lot of windows? Are you in the environment? Like, if you have a very active lifestyle and you're outside and you're using social media, there's actually less likelihood that you're going to experience higher challenges with your mental health. And then also physical activity. If you're having a high level of physical activity, if you're sleeping really well, then your social media use might not affect you as negatively. So it's very complex. So that's why it comes down to you really managing what works for you. And talking about watching the news, particularly in today's 24-hour news cycle, it can significantly impact your brain chemistry and mental health. So just constant exposure, especially like the negative or the sensationalist content, it really triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Even if we're not there, if we are visually seeing something, the mammalian part of our brain, or the reptilian brain, if you want to call it that way, that amygdala still gets fired up by visualization. So we're experiencing the stress even though we're not there. So a while ago during the fires, if I was seeing more of it, I was in a safe zone. But if I was watching it, my body was responding to that stress. And it definitely led to heightened anxiety, let me tell you. And there's also research that shows excessive news consumption increases symptoms of anxiety and depression. So the brain's reward centers release dopamine when we seek and find information. So even if it's negative information, you're still getting dopamine because you're seeking the information and you're finding the information. Remember, dopamine is all about motivation for reward at the end, for a task completion. So it's still creating that feedback loop that can lead to compulsive news checking behavior. So every time you're like looking for information, you find it, great. Same thing with Siri, sorry. Same thing with any kind of YouTube search that I do. I just have to be mindful. And because this can be really problematic for somebody who's experiencing ADHD, who already struggle with impulse control and attention regulation. And there was a study of found that like 16.5% of people surveyed shows severely problematic news consumption. And that means loss of sleep, difficulty focusing, restlessness. And I don't want the impact of the news to go beyond just your immediate emotional response. You might have an immediate emotional response, but if you're constantly engaging with it, it's going to be a long-term stress response. There's even neuroimaging studies that show that if they have aggressive traits already, your brain is already exposed to violent media content, they will be more aggressive than non-aggressive individuals. So what we consume does influence us. Kind of like when your mama said, like, you need to be careful who your friends are. Is the news your friend? So I know. And so the content can affect your brain function, all of the chemicals. So if you're affecting the function, you're affecting the chemicals, you're also eventually going to affect the actual structure of your brain. So over long term, your brain as an organ is struggling as well. I just want to give you guys the truth. So enough fear mongering on my point. I just need to tell you. I'm going there. I'm talking about social media and the way it affects our brains. Please don't be mad at me. I just need you to know. So, social media interactions are like a neurochemical carnival for our brain, with dopamine playing the role of the enthusiastic ringmaster. So, when we receive that positive feedback on our post, that like, that click, that follow, our brains release this pleasure and reward neurotransmitter, and it creates a sense of satisfaction that can be really addictive. Social media providers are dope dealers, and it's all about the chemical that drives motivation to do something, to reach a task or to reach a completion point. And I'm the same way. I'm a coach, so in a sense I'm a dope dealer. I like to say I'm a hope dealer, but in a sense I am helping people with dopamine. That's that little chemical right here that actually came from a client of mine. So thank you, Christine, love you. And so I want to talk about this dopamine and how social media is harnessing it to get us stuck. So this release of dopamine occurs in our brain reward centers, and it's not unlike the effects of gambling and recreational drug use. It's as if our brains have installed like a tiny slot machine, and each notification or the next swipe is a potential jackpot. We're just like waiting on that next thing, to light us up. And over time, this can reshape our neural pathways, and that potentially leads to behaviors like taking your phone to the bathroom because you're just continuing to watch the YouTube shorts and not being able to take your eyes off of it. That's not healthy. I needed to stop myself. And the other thing too is like there's research that shows that social media use, it just activates brain regions involved in memory and face recognition. This is differing from real life interactions. It's as though our brains are learning a new social language, but one that's more emoji than emotion. Artificial intelligence, not emotional intelligence. We're rewiring our brains for that synthetic bleh. So that I just need to tell you about it. And that constant stimulation from social media can also impact our concentration and our memory systems. So that right prefrontal cortex I was telling you about for executive function, anybody that's, experiencing some ADHD symptoms or challenges with focus and memory, our ability to focus on a single task may become really challenging with increased social media use. And it shortens our attention span because we're looking for that next dopamine hit, right? And also, our reliance on external information sources might turn our internal memory banks into more of like a cloud storage system. So, almost like you need to go from point A to point B and drive there, and you always use the GPS, you're not going to be able to remember it. You can't just drive there on your own. So I want you to be able to utilize that part of your brain. And so and in essence, social media is rewiring our brain's architecture. It's remodeling it and our architecture, our actual structure of our brain for better or for worse. And it's a fascinating neurological experiment with billions of unwitting participants scrolling their way through the laboratory of life. And I'm not here to bash it altogether, so I'm going to talk about the positives too. There are research studies that suggest social media does offer some cognitive benefits. So I'm not bashing it. It's necessary to stay connected. My whole family's on the East Coast, so I do use it. I love seeing pictures of my nieces and nephews, and now my great nephew. Like, come on, I can't believe I'm a great aunt. I mean, I'm a great aunt, but like, I'm a great aunt. See the gray? Anyway, social media helps me stay up to date with all the cute pictures. And there was a 2018 study that showed older adults that were new to social media, they experienced improved cognitive function and enhanced inhibitory controls. You need those for attention and decision making. So that's kind of cool. They actually got more self control and more cognitive function, but they were new to social media. It was just a new skill. I'm sure some of the novelty was really helpful with creating more neural pathways as well. Um, so that encourages brain plasticity. So you're doing something that's a little bit more diverse. You've got different perspectives and information. So it's stimulating learning and memory pathways. And moderate use can help you build and maintain that kind of plasticity. It can help you build and maintain relationships, which fosters community, which is also really good. You get that oxytocin because you feel loved and seen and heard. And then that's also rewarding brain activity in a non addictive way. Um, there's also platforms that enable creative expression and knowledge sharing and engaging in problem solving and visual processing and language skills. Interactive elements can actually improve multitasking. Although, I'm not a huge fan of this. If you've watched the Time to Shine module, I'm not a huge fan and there's research to back it. But if you multitask, good for you. Do what you need to do. But if you are interactive on different platforms, that actually might help you with multitasking and information processing speed because things are happening so quickly. Your brain's taking it all in and you're processing that information at a quicker rate because you've had to adapt, right? So, either way, results really like any kind of benefits that you're going to see from social media really comes down to being mindful with moderate usage. And while caution is needed, social media does offer some cognitive stimulation, social connection, learning opportunities. I'm a voracious learner, and it's across all kinds of platforms and all kinds of different age groups when used with some wisdom. For those of you who are attempting to be more productive with your time, let's talk about the time that people spend on social media and the news. Y'all aren't going to believe this. The average American spends 14 hours and 35 minutes per week on social media. That's a part time job, my friend, that we're not getting paid for. Maybe you are. I haven't monetized my social media just yet. It's probably on the way. God's got me. But 14 and a half hours a week? That's a lot. That's a lot. And as far as news goes, it's kind of hard to track given there's a bunch of different outlets. So the closest research that I found was in 2016 that Americans spent an average of 72 minutes a day consuming news across different platforms. That's 8.5 hours or 8.4 hours a week, which is also a lot. So, like 22 hours, almost 23 hours, like that's a whole entire day that is spent on social media and news per week. So, if you want to be so bold, go to your settings in your phone, find your screen time. If you've done the Time to Shine module already, you may have already done this. That's the course that's all about time management, productivity, and prioritization. If not, this is the moment to get really honest with yourself so you can start to make some changes. Take a look. All right. Then you can set some goals. Where do you want to decrease that? Are there limits that you can set for yourself? And I'll go over some different tips and tools and techniques in another video. So now that you know how social media and news consumption affect your brain, both positively and not so positively, and maybe you've gotten a little honest with how much time you're spending on it, let's talk about some tools and techniques, shall we? First one, set some limits. You can use your built in app feature or a third party app if you want to limit your daily social media usage. Some of these apps are actually in the Time to Shine module of this course, or you can simply go to settings in your phone and set limits for specific apps. I have 15 minutes for social media, so that way I can engage just a little bit. I have an hour for a browser because I like to learn. I like to search for things and articles and look things up and support other people's businesses and their articles and stuff too. And I have an hour for YouTube because I like to learn and sing and laugh. And also, a fun trick that I do is I turn my phone to black and white mode. So it's less addicting. I mean, attractive, right? So here's Wonder Woman. I hope I don't get banished for using her likeness. But if I just hit this 3 times, it should go. Yep, she went black and white. How cool is that? So if I'm scrolling and I don't want to give myself all of those wonderful addictive colors, I can turn it to black and white and it'll help my brain, that reptilian part of my brain that's like, "Ooh, shiny," calm down just a little bit. So that's really really helpful. And because I think they know. Did you know that the founder of TikTok does not allow his kids on TikTok? I refuse to get it. I refuse to get it, that or Twitter or Snapchat. The algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. But I do know myself, don't quite trust myself with it. And more importantly, I know who I want to become. So the next step would be to curate your content. Be selective with the accounts that you follow. Focus on those that provide that positive or at least well-rounded and informative content. Like, is this Arneo, is this making you a better person? And get honest with yourself. Are there people or accounts that you follow that your mind might go into comparison mode or jealousy? Are there people that you follow that you wouldn't be friends with in real life? Your ex, their new partner? So, unless you guys have a seriously great platonic friendship, I'd encourage you to really think about that. Work with your therapist, your counselor on that. But remember, every single post, everything that you're taking in, it influences you toward or away from who you want to be. And then I recommend taking regular breaks. Implement a digital detox period if you want to, especially before bedtime. If you've done the Sleeping Beauty module of this course, I talk about no screens before bed. That'll reduce stress, right? And it improves your sleep quality because of the blue light. There's a lot more research that I could go into about blue light and how it's affecting a lot of our systems, just down to the mitochondrial level. Not going to go into that in this course, but do your research. And I've also heard of a family with teenagers actually doing a no tech Tuesday. So when everybody comes home from work and school, they put their phones and their laptops and their screens away, and they spend that Tuesday with themselves, with each other. I've heard of couples doing this, and I just think that's beautiful. I think that's absolutely beautiful. There are times on Sundays where I will go to my Sunday service, I'll call my friends and family, and then I'm no screens for a while. I'll read, I'll sing, I'll play instruments. And I do that just to reset my body. So that's a regular break is a really good implementation too. You can also use a news aggregator. They're apps that summarize what's going on and reduce what's going on down to like just bullet points. So it's not information overload all the time. And that way I don't have to go to this news source and watch this story. And this helps me a lot. I actually use one that's aligned with my faith, so I can view the world through that kind of values-based lens. It tends to be not like we're taking sides, but how should we view this so we can be a positive impact in the world? And it's, research whatever you need to for yourself with the lens that aligns with you. If you want something that's a specific political view or a specific social view, just find one that condenses everything down into bullet points so you can stay up to date on current events without having to listen to all of the fear mongering in the story. And guys, this was so important just a short while ago here in LA. I kept trying to get actual information that was helpful as a citizen. And so many stations were over the top with just sensationalism and like magnifying the negative, and it created panic. And I had a very long panic attack, and it was not fun at all. I used all of my tools. I'm like, thank you, God, for helping me create this course so all of my tools would be in one place as I'm going through a lot of stuff. So I used all of my tools from the emotional toolkit, the Mind Your Mental, the co-pilots. I used all of my tools, I'm telling you. But I needed to know what was actually going on during a disaster, right? It was scary. It was about a mile outside of an evacuation zone, and it was scary. And I want to give a shout out to KTLA. Thank you for reporting the actual news. I got road closures, evacuation zones, relief centers, the information that the Palisades were being guarded to prevent break-ins without all of the terror. Thank you so much. That's how news is supposed to be supporting the community, in my opinion. And there might have been other stuff that they didn't do perfectly, but I'm just really grateful I could tune into them and not be scared out of my mind. I was getting the information that I wanted. Thank you. So when you're looking at the news, try and get the bullet points if you can by using a different app or a different website that kind of condenses it all down, and be very careful with where your sources are, and be mindful of how you feel. And so while I like to stay aware of current events when I choose to, I personally, I don't want the notifications on my phone or my watch. And so if it's important to me, I will time block it. So I just turn off the notifications. And so that's something else you can do, is enable notification controls and customize your notifications. So that'll reduce the constant interruptions or anxiety. You're like waiting to hear back or whatnot, or you're waiting to hear what's going on with that thing, with that scandal or that update. I don't get news updates, and I have all the notifications for social media turned off as well. And as my online presence grows, I just use the Meta Business app to manage all of my Facebook, Instagram posts, any comments and messages, so I can engage with people who are engaging with the content. But I don't get lost scrolling. So I use an app that schedules everything. I can engage with the engagement there, but I'm not stuck scrolling. So that's another thing that I use as well. Um, how about some offline activities? And you can balance your screen time with like physical activities, like face-to-face interactions and hobbies? How about like outside, like sunshine and air and birds and such? That's actually linked very closely to not only our mental health, but our like cellular health. We are meant to be in nature, and we all know this, but we don't realize why. Lots of research on out on that too. So the other thing is just practicing mindful consumption. Be aware of how different types of content affect your mood, your mental state, and then those mental health apps that we talked about in the Mind Your Mental module. As soon as you're done with news or social media, you can track your mood, or you can meditate, or go take a walk to burn off some ick. I know for me, anytime I feel anxious, I will do push ups. My arms look great right now. Just right after the fires and everything, I was like, man, I'm looking pretty good. But it's a good tool to help get out some of that anxious stuff, and it's used productively. Another thing is seek support. You can join if there, especially if there's a disaster going on, if there's, heavy, political stuff that are happening, like especially communities that are focused on mental health, your well-being, whether that's spiritual, non-spiritual, if it's a support group or just a network. It's definitely necessary that you have support. Like if it's a political upheaval, natural disaster, that's actually part of the co-pilots module of this course as well. Just having support when life is happening is everything. I was told once that your mind is a bad neighborhood and nobody should be in there alone. I don't believe that anymore because I actually have tools now, but at the time, they were right. So just overall, just educate yourself. Learn about digital wellness. That's a thing. Look up digital wellness and then implement some strategies to maintain a healthy relationship with technology. And then hopefully you can create a healthier balance between staying informed and connected and protecting your mental and well being in a very, very digital age. Hope this helps.